The night the moon goddess rejected Rhea, every wolf in the temple heard her scream. Then they heard the other one. The one that did not come from Rhea's throat. The one that came from above. This one does not belong to me. The sacred fire exploded outward from the altar, not upward the way it always did during the naming ceremony, not the clean bright column of silver flame that meant the moon had accepted her child and written the fate mark onto willing skin, but outward, sideways, in every direction simultaneously, like something had been rejected so completely that even the fire could not contain the force of it. The mating marks onto the temple walls turned black, all of them. Every carved symbol that had glowed silver since the temple was built 300 years ago. Every moon phase, every wolf sigil, every ancient word in the old language that the Pax had stopped speaking but had never stopped answering, turned black in the space of one breath. And every alpha in the ceremony stepped away from Rhea. Not dramatically, not with anger or disgust, or the performed cruelty of wolves who wanted her to know what they thought of her. Simply, away. This instinctive retreat of powerful wolves, removing themselves from proximity to something the moon had declared outside the order of things. Rhea stood at the altar alone. The sacred fire was gone. The marks on the walls were black. The other girls who had come to the temple that night for their naming ceremony were pressed against the far wall into a cluster. Some crying, some simply frozen, all of them watching her with the expression of people who are grateful it is not them. The high elder of the ceremony, a silver-haired wolf named Marin, who had performed 300 namings and had never once seen the fire go sideways, stood at the edge of the altar and looked at Rhea with an expression that Rhea would spend years trying to forget. Not pity, something worse than pity. The expression of a woman who does not know what to do and is not going to pretend otherwise. Rhea was 16 years old, and from that moment, from the night the moon said her name out loud and then said it did not belong to her, people began forgetting she existed. Not all at once, slowly, painfully. Her best friend Sella forgot her birthday first. 3 months after the temple. A small thing. Birthdays were small things. Rhea told herself it meant nothing. Sella was busy. Sella had her own life. Everyone forgot birthdays sometimes. Then Sella forgot her face. Not completely, not immediately. But there was a morning, six months after the temple, when Rhea walked into the room where Sella was sitting, and Sella looked up and her expression was the expression of someone looking at a stranger they are trying to place. Not recognition. The effort before recognition. The moment when a face is familiar but the name attached to it is just out of reach. The name came back. It always came back at first. But the effort required to retrieve it grew longer every time. Then the name stopped coming back at all. Her own mother looked directly at her one morning across the breakfast table. Looked at her with the attention of a woman trying to understand why there was a young wolf in her kitchen. And asked, "Who are you?" Rhea had not answered. She had walked out of the kitchen and sat in the garden for 3 hours and understood. In the way of someone who has been trying not to understand something for long enough that the effort finally collapses, that this was not going to stop. The moon had refused her, and the world was following the moon's lead. The cruelest part, the detail that Rhea would carry for years like a stone she had swallowed and could not digest, was that the moon never let her die. She was not fading physically. She ate, she slept. Her wolf, diminished, uncertain, the wolf of someone whose fate mark had never been written, still rose in her chest at the full moon, even if it no longer felt like anything the moon had claimed. She was alive, fully, completely, with every nerve and every memory and every feeling intact. She simply did not exist in the world the way other wolves existed. She was present in every room she entered, and remembered by no one who left it. She stopped counting the years. Welcome to MoonNoir. If this is your first time here, subscribe and like. You found the right place. Let's go. She was 23, the night everything changed. 7 years after the temple. 7 years of navigating a world that kept misplacing her. 7 years of introducing herself to people she had met a dozen times. 7 years of the exhaust resignation of someone who has stopped expecting anything to change. The royal gathering at Ashenmire was not something she had intended to attend. She had been passing through the Northern Territories on her way to a border settlement where a pack elder had requested a mediator for a land dispute. One of the small practical tasks that had become Riad's primary occupation, because border disputes required someone who could move through pack politics without being remembered long enough to take sides. And Rhea was uniquely suited to that particular requirement. She stopped at Ashenmire because her travelling companion, a young wolf named Fen, who forgot her name every 3 days, but whose own name she never forgot because that was how the curse worked, asymmetrical and specific, needed food and rest. The gathering was visible from the road, the great hall of Ashenmire blazing with light. Wolves in formal clothing moving through the courtyard. The energy of a political event that the surrounding territory had organized its entire week around. She should have kept walking. She did not keep walking. She told herself it was practical. The hall would have food. The hall would have warmth. The hall would have the anonymous cover of a large crowd of wolves who would not remember her presence long enough for it to matter. She walked in through the side entrance. The entrance used by staff and suppliers and the various wolves who moved through formal events without announcement. The great hall of Ashenmire was enormous. Stone walls hung with the sigils of every pack that had ever sworn allegiance to the Northern Territories. Long tables running the full length of the hall. Hundreds of people in formal dress engaged in the performed sociability of political gatherings. Conversations that were negotiations wearing the clothing of pleasantries, alliances being assessed through the medium of dinner, every exchange carrying layers of subtext that nobody acknowledged directly. Rhea moved along the edge of the room the way she always moved. Close to the walls, away from the center, occupying the space that powerful people did not bother to claim, because it was not worth claiming. She found food, she found a corner. She ate standing up with her back to the stone wall and watched the room with the attention of who has spent 7 years learning to see everything, because nobody sees her. She was watching a dispute developing between 2 borderlords on the far side of the hall. The body language of it, the angle of their shoulders, the way the older one kept touching the sigil ring on his right hand, which meant he was about to say something he had been saving for a confrontation he had planned in advance. When she felt it, not a sound, not a movement, not anything she could have pointed to and named as the cause. A feeling, the feeling of being looked at, not glanced at, not the brief registrations of someone processing the contents of a room. Being looked at, deliberately, with the full weight of someone's attention directed at her specifically, and not moving on. She turned her head. He was standing at the head of the hall. She knew who he was before she knew his name. The way you know certain things. Not from information, but from the quality of presence that some carry so completely that it precedes every formal introduction. Draven, Alpha King of Ashenmire, the most feared man in the north. He was tall and broad-shouldered in the way of someone built for the demands of leading a northern territory. Not decorative, functional. Dark clothing with no ornamentation. The kind of man who did not need to announce himself, because every room he walked into had already felt him arrive. He was looking at her, not past her, not in her general direction, at her, with the focused attention of a man who has seen something unexpected and is trying to understand it before he responds to it. Rhea stood very still. This was not unusual. People occasionally registered her presence in the first moments. The curse was not invisibility, not exactly. It was more like she existed in the peripheral vision of the world, present enough to be noticed immediately, not present enough to be retained. He would look away in a moment. He always looked away. He did not look away. He crossed the room, not quickly, not dramatically, with the deliberate pace of a man who has made a decision and is implementing it, without requiring anyone else's input on the matter. The crowd parted for him the way crowds always parted for Draven. Not because he asked them to, not because anyone announced his movement, but because the quality of his presence created a path simply by existing. He stopped in front of her. He was close enough that she could see his eyes. Dark, direct, carrying the weight of someone who has seen enough of the worst things to have stopped being surprised by most things. He was not unsurprised now. He reached out. He took her wrist, not roughly, not with the authority of a man taking something, with the careful grip of someone who is trying to confirm that what they are touching is real. She looked at his hand on her wrist. She looked at his face. No, his voice low, carrying no further than between the two of them. This is impossible. What is impossible? He looked at her with the expression of a man trying to find language for something that does not have language yet. You are impossible, I have been told. Though usually not directly, something moved in his face. Not quite surprise. The recalibration of a man encountering someone who is not what he expected. What is your name? She looked at him. 7 years. 7 years of introducing herself to people who forgot her before she finished the sentence. 7 years of names that did not stick. 7 years of saying the word that was supposed to identify her in the world and watching it slide off people's memory like water off stone. Rhea, he said it back. Not as a question, not as confirmation, as something else. As the act of a man receiving a word and deciding to keep it. Placing it somewhere deliberately, with intent. Rhea. And the way he said it, like he had been searching for it. Like it was something he had known the shape of without knowing the sound, made her understand something she was not prepared to understand. He was not going to forget it. How long? She looked at him. How long has the moon refused you? The hall was full of people. The borderlords were still in their confrontation on the far side of the room. Nobody was watching them. Nobody ever watched her. 7 years. He looked at her for a long time. Come with me. She looked at his hand still on her wrist. She looked at his face. The hall was still moving around them. Conversations continuing. Alliances being assessed. The performed sociability of a political gathering that had no idea what was happening in the corner, where a man had stopped walking, and a woman had stopped waiting to be forgotten. I do not know you. He let that sit between them for a moment. And right now that is more than anyone else in this room can say. She thought about that. 7 years of rooms full of people who did not know her, did not see her, did not say her name and mean it. 7 years of being the one who knew everyone and was known by no one. And this man, this impossible, inconvenient, gold-eyed man who had crossed a hall full of people to stand in front of her and say her name like he intended to keep it. She looked at his hand still on her wrist. She looked at his face. She went with him. He took her to his private council chamber, a room at the back of Ashenmeyer's great hall that smelled of old wood and existing fires, and the accumulated weight of decisions made in private that shaped the public world. He closed the door. He turned to face her. Sit down, he said. Not unkind. The flat, practical directive of a man who has something to say and wants to say it, without either of them standing. She sat. He sat across from her. He looked at her for a long moment, but before recognition that she saw on other faces. Not the sliding away of someone who was already starting to lose her. The direct look of someone who was seeing her completely and retaining everything they saw. It was disorienting. In the way of slumps you have wanted for so long that receiving it feels almost like a threat. You were at the naming ceremony 7 years ago. Not a question, yes. I was not there. I heard about it. The fire. The marks. He paused. Everyone who was there remembers the fire. Nobody remembers the girl. That is how it works. Not for me. She looked at him. I have never seen you before tonight. But when I looked at you across that hall, I understood. He stopped. There is no rational explanation for what I understood. Only that you were there, and I could see you. And that seeing you felt like something I had been about to do for a very long time. The bond. The word sat between them. He did not confirm it. He did not deny it. He looked at the word, the way you look at something you have been thinking about from a careful distance. The moon refused you. which means the bond should not be possible, which means what I felt when I saw you across that saw. They both understood it should not exist, and yet there it was. Undeniable, sitting between them in that old stone chamber with no rational explanation either of them could offer. The fire in the council chamber burned. The sounds of the gathering on the other side of the door continued. The murmur of 100 conversations, the movement of human guests through the formal space of the political gathering. What happens to you when people forget? She looked at her hands. I remain. Everything that I am remains. The memories, the feelings. Everything that makes a person stays exactly as it is. Only the impression I make on the world disappears. I remember everyone. No one remembers me. Your mother. She looked at him sharply. I told you, I know you, or I am starting to, and I am sorry. That is not something I say often. But I am sorry for that. How do you know about my mother? I do not know specifically. I know the shape of what this curse does. And I know, from the way you said 7 years just now, and from the way you moved through that hall like someone who has learned to take up as little space as possible, that the worst of it has been close. People who should have been the last to forget. She was quiet for a moment. She looked at me and asked who I was. 3 years ago, she has not remembered me since. Is she still alive? Yes, she is happy. She has no gap where I used to be. That is the design of it. The moon did not just refuse me. She erased the space I just supposed to occupy. Nobody grieves what they have forgotten. Nobody notices the absence, because the absence does not register as absence. It registers as nothing, as if I was never there. Draven looked at her. The expression on his face was not pity. She would have left immediately if it had been pity. It was the expression of a man receiving information and understanding its full weight, without requiring it to be explained further. You have been alone. For 7 Sitzley. 7 years. She confirmed it without flinching. Completely alone. And Asher did not soften it either. When Rhea would learn the same truth from a different direction later. It was simply what it was. And tonight I looked at you across a hall full of people and said your name. Yes. How did that feel? She looked at him for a long moment. Terrifying. And the closest thing to real I have felt in 7 years. He asked her to stay, not permanently. Not with the authority of an alpha king making a declaration. Simply asked. The request of a man who understood that asking was the only appropriate thing, and who was not accustomed to asking for things. She said she would stay 3 days. She stayed 3 weeks. Not because he asked her to extend it, because she woke on the morning of the 4th day and understood. With the clarity of someone whose survival has depended on reading situations accurately. That she was not finished here. Something was happening in Ashenmire that she did not yet understand. Draven remembered her. Every morning he said her name. Not performatively, not as a demonstration of his ability to retain what others forgot. Simply as the first act of the day. As if saying it was the thing that began everything else. She noticed this on the 2nd morning. She did not mention it. She also noticed that he did not sleep well, that he spent the very late hours in his war room rather than his chambers, that there was a quality to his movement in the mornings, a slight heaviness, a barely perceptible drag. That was not tiredness exactly, something else. Something she was accumulating evidence about, without yet having enough to name. She also noticed that his ISNA circle, the council members who attended every formal meeting, had a way of watching Draven when they thought he was not looking. The way people watch someone they are worried about. The way people watch someone they love and are afraid for. She noticed this on the 5th day. It happened on the 9th day. Rhea was crossing the eastern courtyard of Ashenmire when 3 members of a visiting border delegation stepped into her path. Not deliberately, not with intention. Simply, the way people moved through spaces they had claimed, without thinking about who else might be in them. She was there. They did not register her as someone who required consideration, because they had already begun to forget she was present. She stepped to the side. They stepped the same direction without looking. She stepped the other way. One of them, broad, distracted, mid-conversation with the person beside him, walked directly into her. The impact was enough to knock her bag from her shoulder, her notebook, her documents. The accumulated material of a woman whose entire professional existence lived in portable form because she had learned long ago that nothing she left anywhere stayed found. Everything scattered across the courtyard's stones. The man who had walked into her looked down at the scattered documents. He looked up. His eyes passed over her, not through her, not with recognition. Simply registered nothing, processed nothing, continued the conversation he had been having as if the impact had not occurred, and the documents on the ground were simply there and unrelated to anything he had done. He kept walking. Rhea crouched down. She began gathering her documents from the courtyard stones with the methodical efficiency of a woman who has been doing this, gathering the pieces of herself from places they should not have fallen. For 7 years. She did not look up. She did not expect anyone to help. What she did not expect was the sound, low, resonant, coming from somewhere behind her and above her, and carrying in it something that was not language, and was not quite a growl, and was the frequency of a man who has processed something that has bypassed every layer of civilized control and gone directly to the instinct underneath. She looked up. Draven was standing at the entrance to the eastern courtyard. She did not know how long he had been there. She did not know what he had seen. She knew, from the quality of his stillness, from the way his hands was positioned at his sides, from the gold that had taken over his eyes completely and without his permission, that he had seen enough. The 3 members of the border delegation had stopped walking. They had turned. They were looking at their Alpha King with the expression of people who have just understood that they have done something in proximity to something, the something matters to him, and are rapidly reassessing every decision of the last 30 seconds. Draven did not speak. He looked at the man who had walked into Rhea and kept walking. The man dropped his eyes immediately, not a choice, a reflex. The reflex of someone whose instincts have correctly identified a threat level and responded before his conscious mind caught up. Draven walked across the courtyard, not quickly, the terrible slowness of a man who is controlling something that does not want to be controlled and is succeeding through discipline alone. He crouched down beside Rhea. He picked up her notebook. He picked up her documents, one by one, with the careful hands of someone who understood that these things mattered and was not going to handle them as anything less than what they were. He held them out to her. She took them. She looked at his face. His eyes were still gold. The control was still there. The discipline, the managed authority of a man who has been governing himself for long enough that management is second nature. But underneath it, something was present that she had not seen before. Something that had not been managed in time. "Are you all right?" His voice came out differently than usual, lower, spoken through a control that was still reasserting itself. "Yes, I am all right." He looked at her for a moment, his eyes on her face. The inventory of a man checking something he needed to confirm with his own assessment rather than anyone else's report. Then he looked at the 3 members of the border delegation. He did not say anything to them. He did not need to. They were already moving, quickly, with the efficiency of people who have correctly identified that remaining in this courtyard is not in their interest. Draven looked back at Rhea. She was looking at him with the expression she wore when she was noticing something she had not expected. The alert quality of her attention that meant she was filing something away in the place where she kept things that mattered. "What?" He looked at her for a moment. "I do not know what you are asking." She looked at him. "You looked at me just now, like you were afraid something had happened to me. Something did happen to you." I dropped my notebook. He looked at her. "Something happened to you. And I was across the courtyard and I could not." He stopped. The control fully back now. The gold receding. The managed authority of the Alpha King of Ashenmire returning to the surface. But she had seen what was underneath it. And she did not forget things. You could not what? He looked at the courtyard stones where her documents had been scattered. I could not get there fast enough. She looked at him for a long moment. "You were afraid." Not a question. An observation delivered in the direct way she delivered everything she was certain of. He did not confirm it. He did not deny it. He looked at her with the expression that was close to the one she had been cataloguing since the first night, but with something added to it now. Something underneath the gladness that was older and less comfortable and completely honest. The expression of a man who has just discovered that he has something to lose and has understood. From the visceral immediacy of what happened in his chest, when he saw her documents scattered across the courtyard stones and a man walking away from the impact like she did not exist, that losing it is not something he is prepared to accept. She held her notebook against her chest. "Thank you for the documents." He nodded. He walked back toward the pack house. She stood in the courtyard for a long time after he was gone. She had spent 7 years being walked through, walked past, walked over, by people who registered no impact, who felt no consequence, who did not carry the memory of her presence far enough to feel what it cost to lose it. She had stopped expecting anyone to notice. She had stopped expecting anyone to care. And Draven of Ashenmire, the most feared Alpha King in the north, had crouched down in a courtyard and picked up her documents one by one with careful hands and looked at a man with gold eyes until that man forgot every other instinct and remembered only that leaving was the correct decision. Not because she had asked him to, because he had seen it happen, because something in him had responded before he had a chance to manage it into something more controlled, because she mattered to something in him that did not wait for his permission. She filed that away, in the place where she kept the things that were too important to leave anywhere else. She went to find Asher. Asher was Ashenmire's healer. Small, sharp, with the quality of stillness that came not from composure, but from genuine confidence. The healer who had been treating Draven's inner circle for 12 years. She found Asher in the treatment room. She closed the door behind her. She sat down across from Asher, without being invited to sit. "Tell me what is happening to him." Asher looked at her, not with surprise, with the expression of someone who has been waiting for this conversation, and is reassessing their timeline now that it is arriving earlier than expected. "How much do you know?" "Not enough. Tell me the rest." Asher was quiet for a long moment. When the moon refuses someone, the refusal does not only affect the person who was rejected. Rhea looked at her. The bond exists whether the moon acknowledges it or not. The moon refusing you did not dissolve the bond. It displaced it, left it without a home, without the moon's protection or structure, without the framework that keeps a bond from consuming the people it connects. What does that mean? It means that when Draven looked at you across that hall and felt the bond, when he said your name and the bond responded, he took on something that the moon's refusal left unprotected. What did he take on? Asher looked at her directly, the full weight of the curse. Not your portion of it, the whole of it. Because the bond has to live somewhere, and you cannot hold it. The moon refused you the capacity to hold it. And so when Draven accepted the bond, he accepted everything attached to it. He is being forgotten, slowly, the same way it happened to you. His inner circle is beginning to not forget him, not yet, but to find it harder to hold him in their minds between interactions. His face is becoming harder to keep. The process is slower in him than it was in you. He is an Alpha King. He has more anchor in the world than a 16-year-old girl at a naming ceremony. But the direction is the same. How long? At the current rate, a year, perhaps 18 months, before it becomes significant. And he knows. He has known since the 3rd morning. He woke up and one of his council members looked at him with the expression of someone struggling to place a face that should have been immediately familiar. He said nothing. He has told no one. He has been managing it, the way he manages everything, completely alone, without a single person in Ashenmire knowing what was being carried or what it was costing him. Rhea sat with that for a long time. Why did he not tell me? Because he does not want you to leave because you feel responsible. He does not want you to stay because you feel guilty. He does not want the thing between you to be shaped by obligation in any direction. Rhea looked at her. He would rather be forgotten than have me choose him because I felt I had to. Asha held her gaze and did not look away from it. Yes, that is the most arrogant thing I have encountered in 7 years of being forgotten by everyone I have ever known. Asha looked at her for a long moment. Something moved in her expression, not disagreement, not surprise. The specific look of a woman who has been sitting with the same conclusion for a long time and is relieved to finally hear someone else say it out loud. Yes, it is. She went to find him. He was in the ancient forest at the edge of MoonNoir's territory. The part of the forest where the trees were old enough to have names. Where the moon's light came through the canopy at angles. That made everything look like it was already memory. She found him standing at the edge of a clearing, not doing anything, simply standing. Looking at the trees with the expression she had now catalogued completely. A man looking at something he loves and is not sure he will always have. He heard her approach. He turned. He looked at her. He said her name, Rhea, the way he always has said it. The way she was beginning to understand he had been saying it every morning, not as a demonstration, but as an act of will. A choice made daily. I will remember. I will say it. I will keep it. You knew. Not accusation. The flat declarative of a man who has been found out and has decided that honesty is the only remaining option. Asha told me. He looked at the trees. I was going to tell you. When? He was quiet. When I had decided what to do about it. When there was something I could offer alongside the information that was not just. He stopped. I did not want to hand you a problem I had not yet found a way to solve. It is not your problem to solve alone. It became mine the night I looked at you across that hall. You did not know what you were accepting. No, but I would have accepted it anyway. She looked at him. Why? He turned from the trees. He looked at her directly. Because I looked at you across a hall full of people, and I could see you, completely. And I understood. Before I knew anything about the curse or the bond or what accepting it would cost. That seeing you was not something I was willing to give up. Even knowing now? Especially knowing now. Because now I understand what it cost you. 7 years. And you are still here. Still moving through a world that keeps losing you. Still noticing everything. I have spent 7 years being forgotten by everyone who was supposed to remember me. My best friend, my pack, my mother. She looked at him. And you have been saying my name every morning since the 3rd day. Yes. Why every morning? Because the morning is when the forgetting is strongest. The night creates distance. Sleep creates distance. The morning is when the world is most likely to start the day without you in it. He looked at her. I was not going to let that happen. She stood in the ancient forest of MoonNoir, at the edge of a clearing, where the moon's light came through at angles that made everything look like memory. She looked at the man who had been saying her name every morning for 3 weeks, against the active current of a curse that was beginning to take him the way it had taken everyone else. There may be a way to stop it. What is happening to you? He looked at her. Asha said the curse is displaced, that it has no home, that when you accepted the bond, you accepted the full weight of something that has no framework to hold it. Yes, the moon refused me, but the moon's refusal was a declaration, not a dissolution. She said I did not belong to her. She did not say I did not exist. She did not say the bond was impossible. She said this one does not belong to me. She looked at him, which means I belong to something else, or to someone else, yourself. His voice quiet and certain. She looked at him. The moon refused you, which means you are not hers, which means the old laws, the ones that require a moon bond for a mating to be recognized, do not apply to you. Because you are outside the moon's jurisdiction, you always have been. He paused. Which means a bond between us would not require the moon's recognition. It would not require anything except the two of us forming it. The clearing was very quiet. The ancient forest breathed around them, if we chose each other, deliberately, consciously. Outside the moon's laws entirely, the bond would have a home. A framework that did not depend on the moon's acknowledgement. She let that sit in the clearing for a moment. The curse would have nowhere to go. Yes. He looked at her for a long time. Rhea, I know. I know what I am saying. I am asking you to choose something the moon did not sanction with a woman the moon refused. I am asking you to build something outside every law that has been followed for 300 years. He did not hesitate. Yes, you are. She looked at him, and he held her gaze. Something in his expression shifted, not dramatically. The specific quiet movement of a man who has been carrying a truth he has not yet said out loud and has just decided that now is the moment. I have been choosing you since the night I said your name across a hall full of people who could not see you. She looked at him for a long moment. That was 3 weeks ago. I know. I am a fast learner. She almost smiled. He saw it, the almost. He filed it away in the place reserved for things that were too important to leave anywhere else. I need you to understand something before this becomes what it is becoming. I need you to understand that I am not choosing you because of what you are losing. I am not choosing you because of the curse, or because Asha told me what is happening to you, or because I feel responsible for what accepting the bond has cost you. I know. I am choosing you because you said my name every morning for 3 weeks, because you understood that the morning was when the forgetting was strongest, and because that is the most honest act of care that anyone has directed at me in 7 years. And I am not going to pretend it does not matter. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached out. He took her hand, not her wrist this time. Not the careful grip of a man confirming something is real. Her hand. The full deliberate clasp of someone who has decided something and is not being cautious about it. She looked at their hands. She looked at his face. Ria, her name in his voice. The quality of it that she had been trying to describe to herself for 3 weeks and had finally found the word for. Permanent. He said her name like it was permanent. Both of them understood what that meant. Not a question between them anymore. Not something that needed further discussion or confirmation or the careful management of expectation. Simply a decision arrived at from 2 different directions that had found each other in the same clearing at the same moment. And in the ancient forest of Ashenmire, where the trees had names and the moon's light came through at angles that made everything look like memory. 2 people chose each other outside every law that had ever governed choosing. Not because the moon sanctioned it, because they did. The bond settled between them like something that had been waiting for the correct address. Not with the dramatic force of the sacred fire. Not with the black marks and the exploding altar and the goddess' voice declaring wrongness in every direction. Quietly. The way the right things always settle. Without announcement, without requiring witnesses. With the certainty of something that has found where it was always supposed to be. Ria felt it the way she felt things. Not dramatically, not all at once. In the small accumulations of something real. The warmth of it. The quality of being known. Not seen, not recognized, known. By something that was not going to forget. She looked at Draven. He was looking at her with the expression she had been cataloguing for 3 weeks, and had finally stopped trying to name. Because the name for it was simple, and she had been making it complicated because simple things, after 7 years of complicated, felt almost suspicious. He was glad. Completely. Without performance or management, or the careful distance of a man who had decided that gladness was a vulnerability he could not afford. Glad the forgetting stopped. Not all at once. Not dramatically. By the end of the first week after the clearing, the heaviness in Draven's movement in the mornings was gone. By the end of the second week, his council members had stopped watching him, with the expression of people trying to hold a face in their minds. By the end of the month, Asha checked the mark had been tracking, and put down her instruments, and looked at Ria, with the expression of a healer delivering information she had been hoping to deliver for months. It is stopping. Ria nodded. She went back to Draven's study, where he was working, and she sat in the chair across from him, and she did not tell him what Asha had said, because she understood that he would find out in his own time. What mattered was not the reversal. What mattered was the mourning. She began to be remembered. Not by everyone, not immediately. Not the dramatic restoration of 7 years of erased memory. The friends who had forgotten her face. The people who had stopped seeing her. The mother who had asked who she was across a breakfast table 3 years ago. Those people did not suddenly remember, but new people. People who met her in Aschenmeyer. People who encountered her in the course of the disputes she still mediated. People who passed through the northern territories and crossed her path. Remembered. They remembered her name. They remembered her face. They remembered the quality of her attention. The way she noticed things. The way she listened. The way she made people feel that whatever they were saying was the most important thing in the room. It was not the restoration of everything that had been lost. It was the beginning of a life that was not organized around managing an absence. She noticed it first in the market at Aschenmeyer. A vendor she had bought from 3 times, who said good morning, and used her name without being reminded of it. She stood at the market stall for a moment longer than the transaction required, holding the thing she had purchased, understanding what had just happened. She went back to the pack house. She found Draven in the kitchen. The kitchen where they had taken to spending the late hours, the ordinary space that had become the room where the performance requirements was lowest. She sat across from him. He looked up, he looked at her face. What happened? Someone remembered me. Without being reminded, he put down what he was holding. He reached across the table. He put his hand over hers. She turned her hand over. She held it. Ria, I know. You are going to be remembered. By everyone. Not immediately. But eventually. I know. How does that feel? She looked at their hands on the table. At the kitchen around them. The fire going. The window open. The warmth of a space that 2 people had built together without announcing they were building anything. Like something that was wrong for a very long time is beginning to be corrected. She paused. And like I do not want to waste the correction. Like I want to use every remembered morning deliberately. Like I want to be here. In this kitchen. With you saying my name every morning, not because you are fighting the forgetting, but because it is simply what you do. He looked at her. It is simply what I do. I know. That is the point. Outside the ancient forest breathed. Inside the kitchen was warm. And Ria. The woman the moon had refused. The girl who had been forgotten by everyone who was supposed to remember her. The woman who had stopped counting the years. Sat across from the Alpha King of Aschenmeyer in the warmth of a morning that was entirely hers. Not because the moon had written her name. Because he said it. Every morning, deliberately, as the first act of every day, and that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Take a moment with that. Then tell me, which moment got you? The temple, the mother, the wrist, the courtyard, the clearing, the morning he said her name. Tell me which one. I read every single one. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The next story's already waiting. Until then, take care of yourself. And remember, the moon does not get to decide who remembers you. Some people make that decision for themselves. MoonNoir.